Revenge films. My husband suddenly became a minimalist. It was annoying because he started telling me to throw away all of my stuff, including all of my equipment I used to work at home. And while I was asleep, some of my work equipment was gone, and I couldn't get a hold of my husband because he had already left for work. I looked through the garbage and searched the closet, but I couldn't find any of it. When I asked about it when he got home, he told me,
I didn't throw it away, I just hid it. I wanted you to experience how nice it is not to have so much stuff. You see how clean your workspace looks?
So I told him, do what you want with your own stuff, but don't touch my things. When I got mad at him, he ended up telling me stories about legendary minimalists for hours. Oh man, I decided to lock my room up. I tried explaining to him why, but he didn't understand at all.
That's like living apart in the same house.
He started saying, by the way, my room was just as organized as a room that you'd see at an open house. But according to my husband, it was still not minimal enough. He ended up giving me back my stuff, but my laptop was covered in dust from being hidden on top of the refrigerator. It was a laptop that I'd been using ever since I started working from home, and I was sad because I had been taking such good care of it. I wiped it off, along with the top of the fridge, and told him, I'm not going to try to stop you from being a minimalist, but please stay away from my possessions.
I want the entire house to be minimal.
Just stick to your own stuff.
What about you rent another room for work then? That way you can separate your work from home. What do you think?
Do you know what you're suggesting? I purchased this room as a workspace that I could live in. You were the one that moved into my house, remember?
Why are you so mad? I think it's because of all this useless stuff you surround yourself with. There was this guy who went minimal, and even his mind quieted down.
If you want to stay at my house, don't touch my things. How's that for minimal? If you can't agree to that, you can get out of here.
When I moved in, you said that this house was both of ours.
Yeah, that applied to the man I married, who didn't throw other people's things away without permission. But I can't live with you if that's what you've become.
What the hell? We're married. Are you saying that I have no freedom?
This conversation was going nowhere, so I decided to call my mother and told my in-laws over the next day. I told my husband that we needed our parents there to help us sort things out, and he agreed. When they came over, my mother said, Wow, look how clean your house is. My husband responded,
Yeah, I clean the house every day. It's so easy when there's no stuff.
I was the one vacuuming the house every day while he was at work, though. Anyways, I explained the situation to our parents and how I couldn't work if he threw away my work equipment, and their expressions changed. That's not good, my mother said with a straight face. But my husband proceeded to preach about how wonderful it was to live minimally, and that in order to be true minimalist, he needed the cooperation of everyone in the family. When we told him that he should just do that with his own things, he didn't seem convinced. My in-laws were getting worn out from my husband's preaching. I started to feel bad for them, and just as I was prepared to stop him, my in-laws said,
Can we call your sister over?
So, 30 minutes later, my sister-in-law arrived. Her first words were, Wow, it's so clean in here. Do you guys really live here? She looked excited. My husband was happy to respond.
Right? Have you heard of minimalism?
And started preaching to her as well. I tried throwing in my 2 cents here and there, and after listening, my sister-in-law said, Minimalism sounds cool. I've always wanted to try, and suddenly grabbed my husband's phone from the table and threw it into the trash can. My husband was caught off guard.
What are you doing?
When he tried to retrieve the phone, my sister-in-law stopped him and said, Don't worry, it'll make you happier. You don't need these either, right? And started throwing all of his things into the trash. Hooray for minimalism! My husband argued back.
That's not what minimalism is all about!
But my sister-in-law overpowered him. This is exactly what you're doing, asshole. Damn, girl. She then turned to my in-laws and said, "Why are you both just sitting there and listening to this fool? I feel bad for Jill. We gotta take this guy home." And said to me, "I'm so sorry. I'd be pissed if someone hid my important things too." Everything I'd bottled up inside just flooded me. I cried as I remembered how I felt when I was wiping the dust off my laptop the day before. After calming down a bit, I said, "I'm sorry, but I think I need some time apart for a while." My sister-in-law said, "For sure. We'll watch over him until he's sane enough to have a normal conversation." As she went to grab his arm, my husband shook her off and yelled,
Get out of here! Get out of my house!
"Not now. Say goodbye to Jill. It's time to go home now."
Ah! You guys are crazy!
It was like watching a preschooler being caressed by his grown-up sister. He was pretty much dragged out by my in-laws after that, as I watched with my mother. I thought he would come to his senses at his parents' house, but he called me every day to say,
Please, let me throw away your things. It'll be better for you.
So I told him, "If you want to throw my things away, we'll have to live separately." To which he replied,
Okay then. Maybe you just need time to think about it. Watch me, and you'll see that living a minimalist life is so much better.
and it was smoothly decided. My husband spent his savings to rent an apartment nearby. According to my sister-in-law, he had left the house with just a few sets of clothes, his phone, a laptop, and a book on minimalism. She reminded him, "If Jill asks for a divorce, it's over. I hope you understand that." And she came to help out with my work that I was late on because of all the conflict. She seemed like a goddess to me. I was a little bit lonely without my husband, but I missed my old husband, not the new guy who was all religious about minimalism. I guess that if things didn't work out, I would have to get divorced. And if that's what he wanted, I would just have to accept the reality. But about a month in, I couldn't get in touch with my husband for 3 days straight. I had made plans to visit him with my sister-in-law that day, and when we arrived, we saw him sitting in the corner of a room with no curtains. All you could see was an empty box and an orange sunset, and my husband sitting on what looked like a nest made out of his work clothes and personal clothes. The backlight from the sunset gave him a reddish-black tone. As he sat there alone, bobbing back and forth like a zombie as he cried. That was a sight that I'll never forget. He noticed us after we helped ourselves in with a duplicate key that I had.
I hate my life. I'm sorry, Jill. I won't be a minimalist anymore. I just want to go home. There's no point in cleaning if you don't own anything. Without things, this world would just be an empty desert. I see that now,
he said. My sister-in-law replied, "You know nothing about this world, you fool." The whole situation was just funny, and I started laughing. My husband and sister-in-law started laughing too. I thought I would never get my old husband back. The relief that things would be back to normal made me cry as I laughed. They were happy tears. I don't know exactly what went through his mind, but I just live with a guy who loves to clean now. I'm still a little bit afraid that he might start throwing my things away one day, but I'm glad to be back to a peaceful life. I can't overstate my gratitude for my sister-in-law.
After we got married, I couldn't get pregnant for a while. My in-laws nagged at me, and I went to the hospital, but there was nothing wrong with me.
Please bring your husband next time,
My doctor told me. So I brought my reluctant husband with me the next time I visited, and we found out that there was a problem with him. The diagnosis must have been shocking for him because he lost a couple pounds in just 1 week. I stood by his side though. And I wasn't just giving him empty words of comfort either. Even if we couldn't have a baby, I still loved him and wanted to be with him forever regardless. So I told him, "I'm happy that I married you. I want to be with you forever. I didn't marry you just for a child," and reassured him many times. He listened to me and nodded as he cried. Back then, whenever a couple were having a hard time bearing a child, it was always the mother's fault, so I was the one who always got blamed. I knew my husband was too embarrassed to admit that he was infertile, so I took the blame. I always thought of my husband's face that day when we got back from the hospital and didn't have it in me to tell his parents that it was their son's fault. My husband always apologized to me, of course. My relatives, who didn't understand our situation, would say mean things like, "Leave this old hag and find yourself a younger wife." I dealt with this on a daily basis, but it was for my husband. 10 years passed like that. One day, my husband brought home a young and cute-looking girl. She was infertile too, and my husband said,
She's the only one that understands me.
He looked so happy as he gently held her fragile hand. My husband was depressed after he found out about his infertility, so I used to take him out every chance I had. We went on trips, picnics, hiking, zoos, art museums, all kinds of places together. Apparently, he met the girl during one of our trips together. I just wanted him to see that there was so much more to life than having a baby. I wanted to replace his bad memories with good ones. I was so happy when I saw how much happier he seemed. I preserved through all these sarcastic comments for him, and this is how he repaid me. My in-laws were excited to hear of their son's affair. "Now that he's with a younger girl, we have a chance to have a grandchild," my mother-in-law shouted in joy, right to my face. I was about to lose it. 10 years I dealt with all this crap, and it was all for nothing. I did it all for him, and now he was all into this young girl. His parents must have seen me as the perpetrator because they would always say things like, "You're useless if you can't have a baby, and you won't back off him either. Quit being selfish and ruining his life." My husband never told them that both he and his new girlfriend were infertile. I just wanted to get away from the whole situation. When I finally got a hold of myself, I was walking empty-handed at a mountain that I used to climb with my husband. It wasn't like I had plans to kill myself, but some hikers saw me wandering aimlessly and approached me. They thought it was weird that I was dressed like I was about to go grocery shopping at the mountains. We just passed by, but they got worried and came to ask me what was wrong. "Here, take a seat. You're so cold."
Drink this.
The hikers took care of me, and they started hearing me out. I could tell that they were more concerned than curious. They helped me down the mountain and said, "You shouldn't be alone." And we all exchanged numbers. I had nowhere to go, and sleeping in motels. But one of the guys was a business owner and said,
I have a small apartment room that's open. You can live there. It's set up to accommodate my workers, so all the necessities are prepared.
He lent me the room and only charged me for the rent. I was so thankful to all these people for reaching out to me during such a dark period of my life. They continued to watch out for me, invited me on hikes, and sometimes invited me over for dinner. It was as if everything I did for my husband came around back to me. These people really saved my life. I spent about 6 months like that, and one day, they introduced me to a man. Well, the man joined us on one of our hikes one day, but he was so nice. I started looking forward to seeing him, and naturally, we started dating and got married. I never expected to have a child with my ex-husband, but I was able to give birth to an adorable girl. 3 years later, I had 2 more boys, and we were a very happy family. Around then, an old friend told me about my ex-husband's situation. I was completely over him and didn't care either way, but I heard that he got divorced after his young wife cheated on him. Of course, they didn't have a child because they were both infertile. My ex-in-laws realized that they weren't going to have anyone care for them once they were older and were requesting that I come back. By the way, according to my friend, the reason that the young wife was infertile was because she didn't care for her body when she was a minor. In other words, she slept around too much and had too many abortions or had too many STDs. I had changed my phone a long time ago, but I still use the same email address. One day, I noticed an email from my ex-husband. I considered just deleting it without reading it, but I was curious what he had to say after all these years, so I opened it up. He wrote on and on about how he was fooled by the young girl and how he was a victim. I could imagine his face, but he got what he deserved. He went on about how depressed he was, and I could tell that he thought that if he told me how depressed he was, I would come running back and support him like before. I was surprised how someone that I cared for before could become so insignificant to me, but I had a family now. 3 lovely children, and a lovely husband who takes great care of me. So, I had no intentions of getting back in touch with my stupid ex-husband or taking care of his parents. I had already moved out of the town I used to live in and didn't think I would ever see him again. So I sent him a family photo of my beautiful children and husband. I figured a picture was worth 1,000 words. After that, I deleted that email address. At the time, I was too depressed to even argue with my ex-husband and just kind of run away. But I felt like I got my revenge. After getting rid of my email address, I felt like I finally got rid of the last thing that connected us. And it felt refreshing. I still stay in touch with those hikers that approached me that day. They were so happy for us when we got married and take great care of our children as well. One day, when my kids get older, I hope to be able to climb mountains with them as well. I heard later that my ex-husband is currently over his head, caring for his parents. And since his young wife spent all their money, he doesn't have enough left to hire helpers or put them in retirement homes, so he does all the work by himself. On top of all that, the divorce court is dragging on, which is just going to cost him even more money. Serves him right. Back when I first got married, I was always nervous around my mother-in-law. We had such different personalities, and I would always get tired after spending time with her. She never picked on me or treated me badly. She didn't get too involved in my affairs, which was a relief. But she worked as a nurse for most of her life, so unlike me, she was always quiet and speedy. She worked so efficiently and would get everything done so fast whenever we went over. And it made me feel useless and depressed. She wouldn't show her emotions at all either. So I never knew what she was actually thinking, which made me even more nervous around her. I figured that she probably wasn't too fond of me, so I decided to keep a good distance from her. That fall, I had my second child. My mother-in-law wanted to see her grandchild, so we decided to visit for New Year's. But my mother-in-law said, "If you try coming over when it's busy, the baby will get tired. There's a 3-day weekend in January, so it might be better to come over then." We figured that she was probably right, and decided to avoid the New Year's traffic and visit in mid-January. That year, it was a 3-day weekend between January 14th to 16th, and the 17th was a weekday. My husband wanted to avoid the traffic, so he decided to take a day off of work on the 17th, so we could head back on a weekday. We spent 3 days at my in-laws' house, and I was nervous as usual around my mother-in-law. But my husband was enjoying a conversation with his father, and my 3-year-old son was getting along great with my mother-in-law. But my mother-in-law came up to me and said, "Jill, you must be exhausted, having to raise children while doing housework all the time. Take some time to relax while you're here." And even took care of my baby, so I was able to get a lot of rest. I was really grateful for everything. January 17th, 5:30 a.m. I heard some noises from the kitchen. When I went over, I saw my mother-in-law preparing food. She had prepared food every day for us, so that I could get rest while I was there visiting. "I'll pack this up so you can freeze it. It should last you a couple of days," she said. She had been up from 4 in the morning preparing this for me. She went on to say, "Breakfast is already finished, so sleep until you're ready to eat, Jill." But, as usual, I couldn't read her emotions, so I wasn't sure if she was being truthful or not. So I ended up standing speechlessly there in the kitchen for a while. Right then, I felt a big shake like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was a giant earthquake. It shook so hard that neither of us were able to stand, so we both got on the floor. The shaking got even harder, and I could see the ceiling lights swaying back and forth. I heard things falling and crashing everywhere in the house. Then I heard a child's voice.
Mommy! Where are you? I'm scared!
I wanted to get to him right away. I'm on the way. I tried to get up, but the house was shaking so hard that I could barely stand even holding on to something. "Watch out, Jill! Get away from there!" I heard my mother-in-law shout. I looked up and noticed that the cabinet doors had opened. At the same time, plates and glassware started pouring out. The last thing I can remember is kneeling down with my hands over my head and something hitting me hard. I blacked out after that. I heard someone calling my name as I opened my eyes and noticed that the shaking had stopped. My mother-in-law was hovering over me, and there were broken plates and glasses everywhere. When the cabinet was about to fall on me, my mother-in-law had pulled me out of the way. I looked at her arms and shoulders that were protecting me, and they were covered in blood. "Are you okay, Jill?" She seemed concerned about me, but I was unhurt. "I'm so sorry," I said, to which she replied, "Go get your child. Let's get out of here." She tried to get up quickly to get out of the kitchen when... Ouch. She moaned in pain as she grabbed her leg. Right then, my husband arrived at the kitchen with his father with the kids and helped us to the hallway to exit the house. I could tell that my mother-in-law was dragging her leg, and she had a cold sweat. The door was warped and didn't open easily. My husband tackled it a couple times and it finally opened. We all stood there in shock for a moment. It was like nothing we'd ever seen before. There was black smoke and fire everywhere. The sky was gray and hazy from all the smoke. My in-laws' house was one of the upper floors of a high-rise apartment. The elevators had stopped moving and the stairs were cracked. As we stood there panicking, we could feel big aftershocks. I could hear noises from all sides like I'd never heard before from the walls in the hallway. The cracks were expanding, and every time the building shook, you could hear something big falling and breaking. My son was bawling. It was just a matter of time before this building was going to completely be destroyed. That's when my mother-in-law said, "You guys, get out of here now!" She went back in to grab us our jackets. "And what about you?" I asked in tears. "I'll come afterwards. Don't worry about me. You guys, go now," she replied with a stern look on her face. I found out later that when she was protecting me, the cabinet fell on her leg. She avoided broken bones, but her bones were bruised, and she was hospitalized for 3 weeks. She figured that she would hold us back because she couldn't move very fast, so told us to go ahead. She wouldn't take no for an answer.
If I leave you behind, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Here, get on my back!
When my husband tried to carry his mother on his back, she slapped him. "Your job is to protect your children and wife. Your wife is still not in full health after her birth. And you guys have a baby. Just think about them," she yelled. She patted my head with her bloody hands and said, "I'm sorry for asking you guys to come visit. I truly am," and smiled. My father-in-law convinced us that he would bring his wife and follow, so I walked down the stairs with my husband and children. Later on, we were grouped at the shelter. I hugged my mother-in-law and cried with her for a while. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she said as she patted me on the head and hugged me. I apologized to her many times too. "I'm sorry too. Your leg, that was my fault." I also realized that she had brought us all jackets, but she was only wearing a thin sweater and an apron. She had also brought baby formula, a baby bottle, and a pot to boil hot water, as well as all the food that she packed for me that morning. My father-in-law had told her,
"Leave it all behind! We gotta get out of here!"
but she wouldn't listen. "I'll carry it myself. You can go ahead if you want." He ended up carrying all of that down the stairs of the crumbling apartment. After realizing once again how much she prioritized my family over herself, I cried again. After the unexpected tragedy, I stopped lactating. But thanks to my mother-in-law bringing the baby formula, I was able to feed my baby and keep her full. I am truly grateful. Also, there was a shortage of baby formula at the shelters, and I was able to share with the other mothers as well. And when I was sweating in pain because my breast milk wouldn't come out, my mother-in-law, who had worked in OBGYN, came to comfort me. "I know how bad it hurts, but if you don't get it out, it's going to hurt even more. I wish I could switch places with you," she said and cried as she massaged me. And all the food that she had packed for me was a great help too, because there weren't enough rations for everyone at first. My mother-in-law fed my children and the other children in the shelter. She also made sure I had enough food to produce breast milk for my baby. After that, "I've been away for a while, so my knowledge may be obsolete," she said and helped at the shelter as a nurse. She talked with the children and elderly people who were in pain or in shock and supported them. Their apartment collapsed a few days later. My in-laws lost a place to live, so we let them come over and stay with us. I've never seen my mother-in-law cry since that day that she had held me in her arms. But 16 years later, when another giant earthquake hit the country and was all over the news, I saw her crying as she watched the television screen. "That must have been so scary." My mother-in-law still doesn't show her emotions, but I know exactly what she's thinking. Thank you so much. I'll never forget how you protected me that day.
On the day of my older sister's wedding, her fiancé ran away with his ex-girlfriend without saying a word. All he left behind was a letter. The night before, we were having a peaceful family dinner. She seemed really nervous about her wedding the next day. Our dad joked around, trying to help get the edge off.
Don't get nervous and drop the knife when you cut the cake.
And our mom was balancing the act. "Oh, stop it now. You're gonna jinx her." Oh, geez. My sister laughed gently. She appreciated the humor. I watched my family go back and forth, filled with a sense of happiness. My sister had been working hard to look her best in the wedding dress and successfully achieved her goal. I told her how good she looked, and she smiled back with an embarrassed look on her face. Thanks. I knew how hard she had been preparing for the big day, and it was nice to see her so happy. That night went by, and finally, it was the big day when my parents got a call from my sister's fiancé's father.
Jack ran away with his ex-girlfriend, and we can't find him.
Everyone was confused and blanked out for a moment. He hurried over to my parents' house, where my parents were told about the details. I couldn't believe my parents at first. I thought it was a big joke, or that the groom had severe marriage blues or something. My mind was racing with all kinds of thoughts. If it was so hard for me to think straight, I can't even imagine how hard it must have been for my sister. According to Jack's father, they were having a family dinner the night before as well. But Jack seemed off. He seemed out of it, and his responses seemed empty, like he wasn't even listening to the conversation. They cut the dinner short because it became too awkward, and Jack just hurried back to his room, saying,
"I've got an early day tomorrow."
The next day, Jack wouldn't come down at all, so they got concerned and went to get him. When they noticed that his room was empty, there was just a letter that said, "I'm leaving to be with Jill," who was his ex-girlfriend. My sister read the note and broke down into tears as Jack's parents and younger brother got on their knees and apologized. My parents stood there, speechless. When I finally started processing the situation, I could feel my blood draining from my face, and my body was covered with cold sweat. I started shaking, wondering what was going to happen after this. It all happened on the day of the wedding, so naturally, the guests were panicked as well. I knew that my sister would be judged for what happened and that she would have to bear all of that burden all on her own. There was nothing I could do. The wedding that was supposed to start in a few hours just got called off, and all members from both families were rushed to notify every guest. After a while, the financial damage was confirmed, and Jack's parents covered it. Shortly after, they both passed away. I'm sure all of the stress from the incident played a big part in that. Jack's younger brother, Tom, was left to fend for himself, so he quit college and started working. My sister was so happy for him when he was accepted into medical school because she knew how hard he had been studying to become a doctor. It made me realize how the actions of one selfish person could horribly affect so many people. After everything that happened, my sister was traumatized. My sister, who seemed so happy that day, was nowhere to be found, and she couldn't leave the house for a while after that. It made me angry that he waited until the worst time possible to leave my sister. He could have saved so many people from so much heartbreak. He just disappeared, leaving everyone to deal with a disastrous situation. 5 years passed. I was now married and moved far away with my husband for work. This move set off a chain of unexpected events. After a while, I was in the city when I thought I saw a guy who looked just like the man who wrecked my sister's life. It had been 5 years, but I will never forget that man's face. I couldn't believe it, but I had to be sure, so I investigated it thoroughly, and sure enough, it was Jack and his ex-girlfriend, and they lived right near me. From the looks of their house, they seemed to be living a comfortable life. He had ruined my sister's life, his own parents' lives, and his own brother's life. And here he was, living a seemingly happy life. Just the thought of that was unforgivable. I was boiling with anger and felt an urge to act on it immediately, but I managed to calm myself down. The first thing I did was write an anonymous letter to Jack's brother, telling him Jack's new address. A couple weeks later, I saw a familiar car parked in front of Jack's house. It was his brother. He had finally showed up. I could hear them yelling at each other from outside. Jack's brother was also one of the victims, whose life was destroyed after that incident. After a while, I saw Jack get dragged out of the house and carried away in his brother's car. Shortly after, the house was for sale. I heard from a friend later that Jack had been dragged back home. My mother told me that he was being charged for all of the financial damages caused by him that day. Thankfully, Jack and his wife didn't have a child yet, so no one who didn't deserve it was hurt. Jack's brother had been working full-time and part-time to pay off his parents' debt that Jack had caused. But Jack's brother was a very capable guy and started up his own online business and successfully paid off all of the debt in no time. Regardless, his resentment towards Jack was immense. He was the cause of their parents' death and the surrendering of his dream to become a doctor. After all, he was now hell-bent on getting his revenge, and Jack and his wife had nowhere to run. They are being extracted of every last cent they make. The couple's debt had grown to over a few $1 million. The wedding fees, transportation fees, honeymoon, and payment for the house that they bought in advance. And on top of that, Jack's ex-girlfriend was also engaged, so they had to pay him alimony and compensation for other expenses as well. There was a reason why I didn't confront them immediately when I saw them and tipped Jack's brother off instead. It was because after the incident, while the couple were selfishly enjoying their life, I had watched my sister and Jack's brother go through an excruciating amount of pain. Jack's brother paid my sister extra money besides the alimony because she had already quit her job because she was planning on getting married. My sister refused because she knew that he was paying off his parents' debt, but he transferred the money directly into her bank account anyways. On top of everything, it was right after he had become a third year in medical school, so he had to pay tuition as well. Basically, Jack's affair had destroyed everyone's life around him. In the end, it ruined his own life, but I have no sympathy for him. Screw him. 15 years since the incident, my sister finally got married. My sister was 40 years old now. "I'm too old for wedding dresses," she said, and so we just decided to have a small family gathering instead. Regardless, we were all happy for her from the bottom of our hearts. She had been against the idea of marriage for a long time after that incident. That's when she met her husband, who understood her feelings.
I'll be here for you until you feel ready.
He had waited for her to come around. "I feel bad for your boyfriend. He's been waiting for so long. Don't you think he deserves an answer soon?" My mother got restless and concerned, so she gave my sister a little nudge, and she finally decided to get married. It was already 10 years since the first proposal. My sister is finally living a happy life with her nice husband. Because of the incident, my sister was traumatized, and it took a long time for her to get over the idea of getting married. I was so happy for her. My sister said that she had given up on a baby because she was already 40 years old. It gave me mixed feelings because she should have been married with children by now. The thought that the incident stole her chance to get pregnant made me cry. But 3 months later, I was pleasantly surprised when my sister called to tell me that she had gotten pregnant. She seemed nervous about her age, but when I reminded her that it wasn't that unusual these days, she smiled and nodded. She's due in 7 months, and I can tell already that I'm going to spoil that kid.
This is the story of how I found out that my wife was having an affair. And when I gave her the divorce papers, she claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence and that I was the cheater. It all started when I found out that I contracted an STD, even though I was only sleeping with my wife. Naturally, the only reason I could think of was her. So I hired a detective and set up hidden cameras around the house and was able to gather ridiculous amounts of evidence. So when I left for work one morning, I left the divorce papers and gathered my bare necessities and left the house for good. My wife called me immediately.
"Leaving without discussing it with me is domestic violence. I bet you're cheating on me as well, aren't you?"
All I could do was laugh at her ridiculous accusations. "So, you won't sign the papers then?"
"Where's my alimony?"
"Fine, I'll see you at court.
"Fine."
Just so you know, the longer this divorce takes, the longer it'll take you to marry your new boyfriend. I just left quietly so you could live happily ever after with him." My wife was silent for a moment.
"But still, I deserve alimony."
"Your boyfriend? He seems like quite the player. It'll be funny if he finds himself a new girlfriend while we're taking our time with our divorce."
Is that supposed to be some sort of threat? I will divorce you unless you agree to pay me alimony, alright?
After yelling at me, she hung up. I was curious what was going on in her mind. I mean, did she really think it was my fault when she was the one having an affair? After that, I had to drop the bomb to my in-laws, who thought that I was cheating and abusing their daughter. I wasn't planning on doing this if my wife peacefully agreed to the divorce. But oh well. I drove 2 hours to meet my in-laws. They looked furious as they nagged at me for 20 minutes in their living room. I sat there quietly, and after I felt like my father-in-law had gotten everything off of his chest, I took out the reports that I brought and played a video of them. It was quite a shocking video, to say the least. Man, I was scared for a second when your period was late. We had so much unprotected sex that it was a serious possibility, you know?
Why would you be scared? I want a baby with you.
Well, the blood type would be different, so your husband will definitely notice that something is wrong.
Yeah, well, we just have to hide it for 1 year. Then I can charge him for child support. He has the money.
Oh, you're bad. They had no clue that they were being filmed and were going all out. I'd already seen the footage before, but when I glanced over at my in-laws, they were losing their minds at the unbelievable sight of their daughter. To make it even more convincing, I showed them the pictures of them making out in a motel lot. My father-in-law looked like someone stole his soul. My mother-in-law seemed confused and held her head in disbelief. As my father-in-law helped my mother-in-law up, he asked, "What about the abuse and affairs you were having?" I couldn't believe that he was still accusing me of such things after all that. But it was their daughter after all. Even with all this evidence, they must have still not wanted to believe it. So I told them, "What about you go see for yourselves? You won't see a scratch or a bruise on her." After hearing that, they must have finally been able to process the situation, because they both just sat there in silence. I reminded them that I planned on divorcing their daughter no matter what, and that I would not hold back. Now that she had lied about me and made false accusations, my mother-in-law crumbled into tears, and my father held his head in despair.
Why? How did things end up like this?
My job here was done, so I left a copy of the reports and left. Neither one of them ended up apologizing to me. I guess the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. I called the next day to see if my wife had signed the divorce papers, and she sounded furious. After my sudden visit to her parents, she had gotten into a big fight with them. I told her that if she was going to make up stories, that I would expose her. And if she wanted to take this to court, everything that she had said and done up until now was all recorded as evidence as well.
You cheapskate! You're just gonna throw a woman out with no money?
She started yelling and getting all hysterical. So I just hung up on her. I don't know how her friends found out, but they started attacking me as well. She even called my work and asked a coworker to mediate the discussion. I'm sure that all they heard was my wife's side of the story, but I didn't want to cause trouble at my workplace. So I decided to meet some of her friends at a diner for lunch a few days later. Two of her close friends showed up to talk to me. Off the bat, one of them said,
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Just as I figured, they had already made up their minds that I was the bad guy. I didn't want to deal with this, so I was about to get up and leave when the other friends told me to wait.
It was her fault, wasn't it?
She said. So I calmed down and decided to stay for the discussion. But even after telling them the truth, the first girl just told me to forgive her, even after seeing the evidence. I was thinking about asking them if they would be saying the same if the boyfriend was one of their husbands. But I didn't want to get caught up in unnecessary dramas, so I kept my mouth shut. But she kept going on about how I was the bad guy and that I should forgive her. And I got fed up. "I've said enough here. Stay out of my family's business," I told them, and called it a day. They were still yelling at me from behind, so I was sure that they would regroup with my wife and the story was just going to keep getting worse. After everything, I was mentally exhausted. One day, my father-in-law called and apologized about everything. After hearing about the affair, he visited the house and saw that my wife was living there with her new boyfriend. And he was shocked and disappointed when it was the boyfriend that greeted him at the door.
It's his fault for leaving me.
I heard my wife defiant, and my mother-in-law exploded, and they got in a fist fight. After calming them down, my father-in-law asked her, "Where is it that he abused you?"
He didn't hit me, it was verbal abuse.
That just confirmed my words even further. "What did you expect? You had an affair!" After that, she got all hysterical and unable to have a proper discussion. He believed his daughter at first, but he was shocked at all the lies and called me to apologize about everything. "I'm really sorry for not believing you and saying terrible things to you," he said. Now that things were square between me and my in-laws, I just had my wife left to deal with. But my wife was in no condition to have a proper conversation. So I visited the house with my lawyer. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the boyfriend's shoes. "This saves us some trouble," my lawyer said as he smiled at me. We went to the living room where the two were having fun, and they both froze in place. So I took a picture. The boyfriend panicked and tried to run away, so I stopped him and said, "So, I'll just send you a certified mail then." After hearing that, he gave up and took a seat. My wife seemed confused, but her boyfriend was married. He had no plans to divorce his wife, and he started crying, saying that it was all just a game with my wife. Things went fairly smoothly from there. The boyfriend agreed to pay compensation, and we were able to create a notarized document on the spot. Now my wife was cornered.
I was being played. I'm the victim here. It's you who I love.
Once again, she started rejecting the divorce. But my lawyer just coldly explained the terms of the divorce and alimony. And we left. After that, my wife went crazy and visited her boyfriend's house. She broke his window and attacked his wife and was arrested. Her parents found out, obviously. They were already fed up with her, but exploded when they found out that she had tried to hurt someone. They forced her to accept the divorce as well, and paid me more than I asked for. According to my father-in-law, he couldn't find any other way to show how sorry he was for everything. So I was successfully able to divorce my wife, and she currently lives at home being watched over by her parents and visits a shrink from time to time. I never received an apology from my wife, but I was able to get my revenge, and she got it pretty bad from her parents. So I guess that's a wrap.
My name is Jack. I'm a salesman at a financial firm. Hey, Jack, I'll be going home now. Make sure you finish all this before you leave. Wait, isn't this Bob's job? Shut up. Bob gets contracts. Look at you, though. You might as well put yourself to some good use by supporting those of us who are making the money around here. Yeah, be thankful, Jack. It's thanks to me that you get to justify your existence. You're right that I may not be producing great results, but I think it's important to build a relationship with our clients, especially those who are thinking about making big deposits, need someone they can trust. I don't think rushing things is a good way to do that. Yeah, that's what they all say. It's proof that you get many complaints and cancellations, Bob. Shut up. What matters is that you get that signature. That's right. It's thanks to people who produce results like Bob that you get a salary. You're pretty much a salary thief. Yeah, but our clients' money is so important to them. I told you to shut up. Stop making excuses. Worthless employers like you should just concentrate on supporting the workers who actually know how to do their job. Drinks are on me, Bob. Let's get out of here. All right, boss. See ya, Jack. Good luck, buddy. Bob, who only cared about contracts, and my boss, who called me worthless, kept dissing me after that. On top of that, I saw my boss with my girlfriend, Jill, who worked in a different division in the same company as me. I asked her about it, but she didn't even seem sorry.
I heard from your boss how useless you are. I can't date such a worthless guy. So I decided to break up with you and date him. He's rich and successful, unlike you.
I was dissed and made fun of at work, and my boss even stole my girlfriend from me. He even threw it in my face at work. Jill even thought you were worthless and wants to be with me. Not only are you worthless as a worker, but you're worthless as a man. That's hilarious. Well, you are more attractive in every way, boss. Of course, girls would choose you over this piece of shit. I was starting to lose it when I got a call from one of my clients at the revenge company. He was one of the people that I had worked hard to build a relationship with. Hey, can we talk right now? Of course, sir. You know that big deal we've been talking about for a while? I've decided to go forward with it. That's great. Thank you, sir. Well, you've been stopping by and giving me very good advice. There's no one else I would trust with my money. I was relieved because this mega contract confirmed my beliefs. However, what do you mean? I've been in charge of the revenge company. Why are you and Bob taking over? What do you think? It's too early for you to be dealing with such big contracts. I'll pass the details on to Bob, so you can just go back to support like usual. That's ridiculous. I've built trust with the revenge company, and they're finally agreeing to sign. Shut up! You just do as you're told. Damn, all that effort I put in was for nothing. I worked so hard for that contract. And when I finally got it, they stole it from me. And even Jill sided with them and said,
Jack is so useless. Obviously, someone more capable should do the job.
And I heard Bob saying, all right, boss, leave this up to me. But I had reached my limit, and I decided to quit my job. I stayed in my house for 10 days until my friend reached out to me to work for his father, who also ran a financial firm, which I accepted. After a while, I got a phone call. Finally, you answered the phone. What do you want? I've already quit, remember? Well, I was thinking. I treated you pretty badly, and I've decided to treat you better. I'll help you with the transition, so why don't you come back and work for us? Are you kidding? No way! Hey, don't try to reject my kindness. Just say it as it is, that you lost your client and you need me back. How do you know that? I received a call from the revenge company. He told me that when he called, they had switched who was in charge. And what did you tell him? Nothing really. I couldn't tell him that my boss and coworkers stole the contract from me. But he knew the moment he spoke to you that you probably stole it because it was such a big contract and that I probably quit or was fired. Oh man. And he said that he wanted to sign with the company I work for now. So that's what we did. You bastard! Are you trying to steal our contract? Hey, you guys are the thieves. I never approached him after I left. The president of the revenge company couldn't trust a company that would change the person in charge just to take credit. And he's warned all of his friends. Some of those friends were former clients of Bob's. And the bad rumors just spread like wildfire. Shit. By the way, the company I'm with now cares about its clients first, which aligns exactly with my own values. So there's no chance I'll be returning. After telling him that, I hung up the phone. After that, the company started investigating because clients were canceling contracts left and right. They tracked it back to Bob's unprofessional contracts and my former boss. They also found out how they had lost my big contract by trying to steal it from me, and how that was the reason that I had quit. They were held accountable and fired after that. I got a call from the president after that. We lost you because of those 2 unprofessional employees. I'd like to offer you a raise and a job position back with us. He told me, but he seemed disappointed when I declined. After everything with my former boss had settled, Jill suddenly showed up at my house one day. What do you want?
Don't be like that. I finally realized how amazing you are. I can finally see myself being with you for the rest of my life.
You just heard all the stories about me, right?
Yeah, I heard that you're a section chief at the new company you work for.
Yeah, that's right. My clients have stayed with me because of the hard work I put into building relationships.
That's great. You are the one for me.
Sorry, I'm completely over you.
No way! We can make this work! You and I are meant to be!
No, I don't think so. I already have a girlfriend anyways.
Huh?
What's surprising about that? We've been broken up for a while already. I have no obligation to tell you. I was a free man.
You're lying!
No, I'm not. She'll be back soon. Do you want to meet her? I should warn you that she's way younger and prettier than you, and she loves me. After hearing that, Jill left with a disheartened look on her face. By the way, I was just lying about having a girlfriend. I just didn't want her coming after me anymore. But it's true that I built my career. The president of the new company had respect for how I treated my clients and what I had accomplished, so he gave me a good post. I'm now surrounded by wonderful coworkers, and I have a good boss. It's like heaven. I vow to continue working for my clients' best interest.
I used to work for a very abusive company. I had a coworker named Jill. She was a hard worker but wasn't liked at work because she was crying in the office after she made a mistake. But that never made any sense to me. I asked our boss about it, and she said,
She was crying in her office. That's so weak.
but later on, I found out the truth. They would bully her by telling everyone else about a new job but give Jill the wrong information. And when she would make a mistake, they would get mad at her.
I told you to do it like this, didn't I? That's not what I heard. Yeah, we told you. Why didn't you ever listen? Are you trying to blame this on us? What a terrible thing to do.
They would attack her like that. Our boss was especially a mean woman. She would attack anything Jill did.
Oh my god, I can't believe you did that.
She would denounce Jill in front of everybody.
Seriously.
You could hear the others mocking her. There was another idiot who was one of their minions who would jump in from time to time.
Yeah, Jill, how could you?
Wait, what?
Why would you say that, Brad? You should apologize to Jill.
What? Why?
Sorry, Jill. Brad just sucks at teaching.
No, it's Jill's fault. You're a jerk, Brad. You're trying to use Jill as a scapegoat.
They would use Brad to diss Jill like that, and the boss would follow.
Jill, make sure you learn how to do your job, alright? Use your head for once. Look at Brad, he's so angry.
And everyone would laugh. Brad had no clue that he was being made fun of too, and would act like he was part of the joke.
Yeah, you heard her. I'm pissed.
I was still new at work, but I knew this was wrong. I found some other people and tried to talk to them about it. What do you guys think of that? But all they told me was, well, we don't want to be the target, you know? It was shocking to hear them say that. I didn't participate in the bullying. Instead, I secretly recorded what was happening. One day, one of the bullies noticed and called me in. They told me to get rid of the footage, or else.
If you won't delete all of it, we're gonna bully you until you're forced to quit.
And I had no choice but to delete it all. Oh, but don't worry. Of course, it was all backed up, but they didn't know that. After they saw that I had deleted everything, they said,
You better not do anything like this ever again.
and ran away. As expected, they started giving me a hard time, but I had decided to ignore it all, and they got bored soon enough. But anyway, also, some of them were scared after they heard that I was recording them, and it seemed like the bullying against Jill started to calm down a bit as well. But Brad, he hadn't changed. One day, when I was carrying some boxes with Jill, Brad came up from behind her and pushed her over. Oops! I dropped my boxes to save Jill and fell down the stairs. I somehow managed to catch myself and avoided getting hurt. Jill was fine, but she was shaken and couldn't move. The boxes spilled over. They had papers and products that our bosses were to use in a meeting that day. Some of the products were broken, and the papers were bent and torn. Brad came over and said,
Oh no, look what you've done. You messed all the papers up. What's the boss gonna do with the client now?
and mocked us. But thankfully, the president from the main headquarters was there that day to participate in the meeting.
Ah!
And he was walking down the stairs that I fell from. He had with him an important client from a big corporation. Brad started making excuses and blaming Jill.
It's your fault for slipping and falling over. It's your fault.
He repeated over and over and over again. But the president pressed hard, and he wasn't able to lie his way out. Brad fainted from the pressure, and an ambulance was called. It was kind of a big deal. The president came to me and said, You fell down the stairs too. I'll pay for your cab. So go get checked at the hospital. Just bring back a doctor's note and you'll be fine. So I visited the hospital as well. I didn't feel much pain, but the doctor wrote me a form that said I had bruises on my arms and legs. Before returning to the office, I went home and retrieved the backed up videos that I had saved on my laptop and picked up my resignation letter that I had prepared beforehand and filled in the date. I caught the president in time to hand him the evidence and asked him to check it out. To which he replied, I'll take a look once I'm back in my office. I'll hold on to your letter, but I'm not accepting it quite yet. And he went back to headquarters. Jill didn't show up the next day. I heard she was on sick leave. Brad was fired right away by the president, and he promised to pay for my hospital bills and compensation in exchange for me not reporting to the police. The bully boss and her team of 15 finally got justice served to them. After a board meeting, they were all split into different divisions, and their salaries were reduced. Some were moved to branches, and some were moved from office work to busier out of the office work. About half quit because they didn't want to change their positions. The mean boss was moved to a branch quite far away, but ended up quitting beforehand. I heard the boss lady has 2 children and was upset about the move, and argued that it was unfair. But after being shown the footage that I had presented, she had no choice but to accept. So she was pretty much forced out. As expected, she quit shortly after. I felt like she should have been fired. But I guess unless it was something like Brad, it's not that easy to fire your employers without risking being sued. So the next best thing is to change their divisions or branches and have them quit. And about my resignation, the president told me, I still want you to work for us. But some of the bullies were still left, and I was looking for a reset. So I decided to quit anyways. I was lucky that the president wrote me a letter of recommendation, and the client he was with that day ended up hiring me. It was a smooth transition to a new environment. Jill was diagnosed with work-related mental damage and was able to receive full compensation for her clinical bills and mental suffering. Jill ended up quitting after that as well, and was paid a large amount as a retirement bonus. 3 years have passed. I ended up running into Jill again, and now we're married. At first, when I saw her, she had changed so much I could barely recognize her. It ends up, she had clinical depression and eating disorders for 2 years after that incident.
I threw up so much that my teeth melted, so I got implants with my retirement bonus. At least my teeth look nice now.
She laughed about it, but I felt bad about not saving her earlier. I told her I wished I had noticed earlier, and she said,
It was thanks to you that I noticed that I was depressed. All I have is gratitude for you.
We started seeing each other after that and began dating. And we got married shortly after. My wife still flashes back to those days and gets depressed, but she's gaining back her weight and she's getting her sense of humor back. We have a daughter now, and my wife still looks back on those days.
Yeah, those were tough times.
Abusive times.
But maybe it was all for the better. I was able to meet a wonderful man
She's talking about me.
and have a beautiful child. I couldn't have asked for more.
She seems happy now, but you deserve more. You deserve to be even happier, I remind her. She cries when I say that and says,
Thank you, Jack.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.